welcome to week 4 of Black Film Challenge. That's where we're at. Hi, I'm Kat Street, your lovely host, and I'm with my other co-host here.
It's the last one. It's okay. All right. So awesome. I am Carletta. Glad to be here. We're excited. Yes, it is week 4.
Yes. We're making it work. We're making it happen. It has been a whirlwind, so thank you guys who have been participating since day one with this challenge, and we appreciate you. I've been collecting all the data, and so there is some stuff coming for this data. It's going to take me a minute to put it all together, but it's coming. But it's been great seeing what everyone's been submitting and contributing and all that stuff. So we appreciate you for all that you do. We're so excited to have with us 2 incredible filmmakers. We have Tony Sebastian Ukpo, and we have Monda Raquel Webb. Sorry, I don't know why. Monda Raquel Webb joining us. So if you guys could come on screen, on camera, we can get started.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Love that background. It's very nice.
Yeah. I know, you guys have like cool backgrounds. I can't do anything. It's too busy here. It's fine. Everyone has seen this corner of my house for the past year now. So.
And
you're well read.
Well read. They've just. I haven't opened them since 2012, so secret. Anyway, could you tell, let's start with Monda, could you tell us what you do, where you're from, and what you're currently working on?
Okay, I need my Missy Elliott music. Where you from? Where you from? I am a storyteller, author, poet, and I am in Silver Spring, Maryland, really close to Washington, D.C., for those who may not know, in the U.S. And I have a production company called Little Known Stories Productions, and I am fascinated by history, and the purpose is to take those little known stories that are buried in the crevices of history's pages and tell them primarily from a woman's lens, and to tell the stories of the people that we don't see in Hollywood, so the everyday folks that make the world go round, our mothers, our grandmothers, and just good old family stories. And I think we deserve to create our own narrative about the history that has either been erased or revisioned, right? So little known stories, that's me.
Awesome. Or overlooked, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's incredible. What are you currently working on right now?
So in lieu of the pandemic, I have started curating a monthly discussion series called The Healing Chronicles, Reframing Race Relations in America. And we approach it Sankofa style. So we look back at how each topic has impacted Black people and people of color. And then we talk about where we are now. And then we talk about what kind of solutions can we do moving forward. For so many years, we've pushed the subject of race underneath the rug, or it's halfway taboo. But with this past summer, the deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, it's time to continue the momentum and just not let it go, right? It's just be like a pit bull with it. So these conversations are really just to blow up racism, not just in the U.S. but around the world.
I love it. I love everything about it. Well, you have to send us a link so we can send it, so we can include that in the recording.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. Tony. Hey, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, we're hanging in there.
Hanging in there. Okay, so you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're at, all that stuff, and what you're working on.
Yeah, I'm a British Nigerian writer, director, photographer based out in Brittany in France. My main focus is narrative feature films, but I kind of dabble in other areas of the arts as well. So I do shorts, I do music videos, obviously photography, art films, fashion films, a little bit of everything. At the moment, obviously with the pandemic, I've been trying to figure out ways of getting my latest feature film out, which was originally supposed to be like a roadshow release, because I made it with the purpose of like having a cinematic roadshow. So basically taking it around East Coast, West Coast of the US, in Paris and London, so just in key sort of like countries, and basically show it theatrically. But obviously now, obviously with the pandemic, all the theaters are shut, and festivals are also kind of out of the question as well. So I've been kind of like revising how I was going to get the release of the film out, and that kind of like pushed me closer towards something I've been thinking about for a long time, which is a sort of self-distribution angle, where I basically release my films by myself online, but not just like streaming or like VOD and that sort of thing, where it's like more like a cinematic theatrical experience. So I did a little test run showing a free screen of one of my last features as well a couple of weeks ago. And that seems to go pretty well. So I'm probably going to do a little roadshow release for this last feature film, which is called Moments in the Quiet City, which I shot in Paris, so pre-pandemic. And outside of that, I'm just like developing some work for TV, some serial work, and focusing on a couple of other feature film projects I'm trying to get off the ground.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I met Tony a few years ago, and he was introduced to me by a mutual friend of ours who's a DP, and he was like, I want you to meet these prolific filmmakers. And then when I looked at Tony's thing, I was like, oh, well, yeah, that's correct. that's pretty accurate, because he's always making stuff, and I admire the wherewithal and the wherewithal, I don't know if that's the right word, but just the churning out of content, because you do have some really cool like content that, like, I guess from the stuff that I've seen, it's like a little narrative, a little like experimental in some cases, and you like toy with just the visual presentation of things in order to create a particular mood. So that's stuff that's like all that I'm all about. I'm very woo-woo when it comes to filmmaking in that way. Monda, I don't know what kind of, so you talked about like your social what am I trying to say, like the intent behind the things that you create, but would you say it's more in the dramatic space or comedy, or like how would you genreify your content, if any, if there is just the one?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So I have a couple of short films. One of them is still on the film festival circuit, and primarily, I suppose that you could say that whatever I do, I don't even start with the intention of it. It just kind of happens. So I guess it's the ancestors talking to me, like, you better obey. But it is to make people think. Either educate, uplift, entertain. And I just believe that as a filmmaker, if I don't make you scream, cry, laugh, or throw something at the screen, then I have failed. So it is all about taking a topic and 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 asking you to see yourselves in the body of that particular character, and how it would make you feel, and what do you do as a result of that. So my first film was about the last known human zoo that took place in Brussels, Belgium in 1958, called Zoo Volker Show. And my second film, Pooch Sitter, on the surface, it's about this really quirky lady who, she's trying to get the love and affection of other people's dogs, but it's a modern day Goldilocks film, and it will give you pause because it is about homelessness. So when it's all said and done, it is the main character's that's her hustle for living, is pet sitting. So I just wanted people to think about, and this happened before the pandemic, but those who are less fortunate than us, many of us are just like one check away from being homeless. And what does that look like? It doesn't mean that everyone is, mentally disturbed, or there are some problems with them. Our veterans are homeless. A lot of families are homeless, and children, they're living in cars and vans, and it's just unfortunate. And studies have shown that people view homeless people as objects, and that's not cute. It's not okay. So I did that primarily to kind of draw you in, make you kiki and laugh a little bit about this little crazy lady babysitting other people's dogs, but then you find out, her intent. So with what I do, and I, like Tony, I am working on a couple of things, a couple of a cautionary short, and then a cute little holiday short called One Man's Trash. So we'll see what happens if I'm able to baby shoot it towards in the fall for the holidays. But it's primarily just to kind of to make you think about the world around you and to consider those that are less fortunate to you and to pay it forward.
Nice. Okay, Monda. Sitting at home doing nothing, I see,
Got to stay busy and all this. So Carlotta, how do you, you contacted Monda to be with this. So
I also once a filmmaker, prior to the, I can't talk. Let me get a vowel pad. Thank you. Prior to the pandemic, Monda had invited me to participate in one of her ML King Day screenings. She hosted about 10 filmmakers. Was it 10 filmmakers? Monda? It was.
It ended up being more than that. It was like 26 films. Last January.
Yeah,
it grew.
Yeah, and so. Just her thought process around exposing people to different kind of films, and that's the purpose of this whole challenge. Is really about exposing us and recognizing, one, the work we have done in the filmmaking realm, but also how much space there is for us to still feel. And so her perspective, I think, is really important in that conversation. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, this been great. I was going to ask, okay, so this was something I was thinking about because today the challenge is to find an international film. And this is from so of course I strategically asked him to be
Tony's from it. What are y'all doing? This is set up.
What? There you go, international filmmaker. For international in respect to, in America, he is an international filmmaker. In respect to him, Monda is an international filmmaker.
That's true.
So, she's an award-winning international filmmaker. Like,
thank you.
Respect on that. So I wanted to see, from the past challenges, like if there's any from the past week, have there been any like classic films by Black filmmakers that we should know about that have spoken to you or have stood out to you, or internationally, both ways, or more, I should say, just world, in the world, any filmmakers that we should be aware of, or that our audience should be aware of?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough question. I mean, well, this I think in Europe especially, there is more of a culture of cinema coming out of Francophone Africa. So you have filmmakers like Ousmane Sembene, who is kind of world-renowned, obviously kind of festival darling as well, like, Cannes Film Festival, all that kind of stuff. And he's made a lot, I mean, he's obviously passed away now, but his cinema is more in the vein of what people would assume art house European cinema to be, because that's the tradition that lots of Francophone African countries kind of came out of. On the other side of that, obviously as a Nigerian, I guess I kind of have to talk about Nollywood. And Nollywood right now is this weird mishmash of kind of like the heydays when it kind of started getting really big in like the 80s and 90s, where basically people are making films like in 5 days, and feature films are kind of coming out pretty much all over the shop. And they were very much local color productions in that they were films primarily for Nigerian audiences. And obviously production values were pretty low, but people didn't really care about the production value because they're thinking more about the story. And now Nollywood is kind of like advanced to the stage now where obviously you can watch Nollywood films on Netflix, you can watch them on sort of dedicated platforms, screening just Nollywood films and loads of film festivals as well. Toronto Film Festival had like a Nigerian showcase as well, like a couple of years ago, where they were showing like, I guess what, new Nigerian cinema, you could also call it. And there's lots of interesting filmmakers coming out of that space who have been working within that Nollywood scene for a long time. and some who are kind of like new to the game. I guess a recent example I can think of, the film is on Netflix, which is why I mentioned so people can actually find it and watch it. It's called Lionheart, and it's by a Nigerian actress turned director. So it's like her first directing gig, and she worked on the script with a couple of other people as well, other filmmakers within the country. And it wasn't like it was her first directing job, but she'd actually already worked on another film as a producer and I think co-writer. I think that film is also on Netflix, but they're both trying to do something a little bit different to what the traditional Nollywood film is. A lot of films coming out of that space tend to be kind of quite comedic or sort of like almost melodramatic in a way. So it's very kind of cautionary tales, very like, oh, you better don't do this, don't drink, don't do drugs or whatever it is, very kind of religious background as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas some of the newer filmmakers, so like the film Lionheart, which is on Netflix, again, they kind of coming more from, I guess, that European or more Anglo-Saxon, sort of like a North American tradition of cinema, where they're kind of mainstream films, but done in a way that's kind of trying to borrow some of those ideals and sort of like themes from European cinema, or like, I guess, more dramatic sort of like, awards type cinema. So there was a controversy around that film in particular because it was shortlisted for the Oscars and then eventually got taken out because it was not in a native language.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's this whole, because obviously the official language in Nigeria is English. Thank you, our British colonizers. But there's obviously like a multitude of different languages and dialects in the country, of which there are three major languages. And so even though most people in Nigeria tend to speak English, at least if you go to like major cities and stuff, the film itself is not solely in English, it's also in like another language. But it was disqualified from the foreign film category because they're speaking in English. So things like that obviously kind of like remove a whole variety of filmmakers who are making films in English language, not in officially English territories. And so I think there's lots to be discovered there as well, especially from Francophone Africa. A lot of whose filmmakers actually make films in France as well. There's Mati Diop, who's the daughter, again, a famous artist. She's also been making lots of films. There's a short film of hers on the platform Mubi. I think it's also free on YouTube. She did it for, I forget the fashion brand. But if you just search Mati Diop on YouTube, I'm sure it'll probably turn up anyway. And she's also doing really interesting work. And I think,
on Netflix. Yeah, that's today's sample pick for international was Atlantic. So ooh, a zombie film.
Oh yeah, that was good.
That was cool. But yeah.
So yeah, as far as international filmmakers, that's kind of the first things that come to mind for me. But it's a similar situation where you really kind of have to think about it if you don't already know about it. And if you want to look for it, you have to really know where to look, because it's not necessarily something that kind of sticks out or has the exact same amount of publicity or marketing as like other films and other filmmakers. Obviously, when you think about international cinema as far as like American cinema, and I'm sure Monda will be able to speak more to this as well, you tend to hear obviously all the big names, you hear the people who get to the Oscars, all the ones who kind of make it. Whereas it's like a whole industry of people who are making movies that people don't know about. And so I think it's something that needs to be worked on for sure.
Yeah, we talked about that last week with our two other guests, Chico and Cass, but Chico talked about the exposure thing, because it was like, oh, nobody's made this, or people are afraid to do that. And she was like, no, like people are making everything we're talking about, they just don't have the exposure. And so that's part of what we're doing with this challenge, is like pushing ourselves to say, well, let's look a little deeper, because there are filmmakers of color who are doing projects that we are not aware of that are really good and deserve eyes on them. So that's one of the reasons we require that the projects be accessible, in a low cost, if not free way, to ensure they get some, some exposure. So thank you for that. And I was going to mention the burial of Kojo. I think
Yeah,
so.
Burial
Oh
Kojo. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
was really good. And then the other one, I don't. The Body Remembers. There's another one. Um, the Body Remembers when the world.
On Netflix.
It was an array film too. It's but
Oh,
international. The Body Remembers when the world broke open. By Ella. I'm cheating. Telefare, the Feathers. Check it out. It was like pretty good too.
There's also Half of a Yellow Sun, which was based off the Chimamanda Adichie book,
Yes, yes.
which has a Chiwetel Ejiofor and Taki Newton and people. And well, there you go. Yeah, perfect.
I love her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess I mean when I think internationally, you talked about classic films that may have impacted you. And,
it could be classic. It could be international. Just it doesn't necessarily have to be a classic international. I was just saying. Like,
oh, okay. Well, I am. So before I talk about before we get into the U.S., I'm really uh I'm really impressed by Mira Nair, who is, I mean, she ain't Black African, but she blacks, but she's an Indian American filmmaker. And because when I was coming up, we just didn't see many Black films. I mean, you had your periods, right? You had your race man telefilms, you had your race films, and then you had the kind of exploitation films. And then my age mate started making, the New Jack movies when New Jack City came out. And then we had John Singleton in that period and the whole, rough 'em, scuff 'em, banging drugs and all that kind of stuff. So, but when I saw Mississippi Masala, which I don't know if it was Mira Nair's first film or not, but Denzel Washington starred in it. And a lot of people might not have known Denzel before he was Denzel, but he had an Indian love interest. And I fell in love with Mira as a director because all of her movies, from Kama Sutra to Salam Bombay to Queen of Katwe, they are about love, life, fire, rage. People are living their lives in living color and they're living it out loud. And so I think that and her films are just they burst, they burst with life and energy, and and she has an ability to show us things about humanity. I think that that is just a real gift for her. And no matter what color you are or what culture you are, it is something that anyone can relate to, because it's all those things that we as human beings, um it's just a part of life. So I respect Mira Nair a lot. So I would say Monsoon Wedding, just you want to just catch up and have some laughs, but also feel, kind of warm and fuzzy inside at the outcome. I would check.
I'm a big proponent of like of films made by uh, people of color or featuring people of color, because when you look, I think that there's like a weird, for some, not for all, there's like a weird connotation. Like if I watch this, it's going to be about this race, as opposed to just thinking about it as a universal story and really going like, oh yes, this is relatable. And maybe that, I'm sure that has something to do with the amount of exposure that is given, because there is this already like bias thinking like, oh, no one can relate to two Black people falling in love. Like, why? Like it's literally the same. The people, on top of, above all else, like they're people. We all have the human experience in common. So that kind of brings me to a question that I had for Tony, which was like, just on the international level, I think that with this challenge, and when I was thinking about making it, it was more so just like, okay, how can we expose more people to people of to filmmakers of African descent making movies, thinking that from the Americans' perspective that it's a very important issue. Like there's a big push. There's always been a push for promoting Black films, promoting Asian American films, promoting Indian films, promoting all this. It's really separating it in that way. And I was wondering if you, from the other side of the pond, feel that same thing happening, or like what is the outlook in diversity, in the diversity of artists over there? Like, is it that same mentality, like, okay, we got to get more, of this, of this culture or of that culture? Is it more nationalistic? But not, I don't mean to sound like, it was more like, okay, we need more French films, as opposed to like more Black French films. We need more Chinese French films. Like, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, my primary experience will be with British cinema. Obviously, in French cinema, it's a very different landscape because in France, the government kind of like has a really big support for homemade films. So there's like subsidies and whatnot for films that are made in France by French filmmakers. So if you go to the theaters, there's always going to be sort of like French films as well as like American films or whatever else. But like there's a very active industry here, even if it's kind of, you could also say it's kind of within a bit of a club, but it's pretty active as far as like support for French quote unquote films. As far as like diversity in England, it's pretty much the same as in the US, I would say, because there's lots of there are lots of films or schemes that are meant to support filmmakers of color. And over the years, that voice has kind of been getting stronger and stronger, especially I guess in TV. There's lots of TV projects that end up doing really well, like Top Boy, which is obviously on Netflix now as well, for instance. There were shows like Misfits, which also had like quite diverse cast. The what?
Is it Mika LaCoil with I May Destroy You?
Yeah, exactly. I May Destroy You. Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of those kinds of projects that are coming out of TV. As far as like feature films, it's a little, there's lots of schemes against supporting filmmakers and films who are making those kinds of stories. But again, they're sort of relegated to, it needs to be a Black story. It needs to be a Indian story or whatever it is. So they're not necessarily letting filmmakers say, oh no, there's like a Black filmmaker who wants to make a Game of Thrones, for instance. It's like, oh, well, but it's not Black or whatever. It's that kind of vibe. So even though there's lots of projects that end up doing quite well, and there's a push. Obviously the British are not necessarily quite as vocal as the Americans, but there is kind of like a movement of like, oh, it's nice. Like they're seeing more projects get out there, and they're more and more inspired to like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start my own agency. I'm going to start my own acting school. I'm going to start my own production company. And then all these various people start kind of coming out of the woodwork because they see that it's possible. And then you get like the Identity School of Acting, and you get people like John Boyega and, what's her name, who's Shuri in Black Panther.
Letitia Wright.
Letitia Wright, yeah, Letitia Wright. Then you get actors turned writer-director like Noel Clarke as well, who did the adulthood films. And so those are all kind of, again, within that space of like, hood films, if you like, or like Black films, or kind of very specifically culturally appropriate films. But you don't necessarily have lots of Black filmmakers or artists kind of going out, unless you're like a Steve McQueen, for instance, who can have pretty much carte blanche right now. But then he came from the art world. So there's a little bit of a different perception of him as a filmmaker and as an artist. And obviously the first film he did had nothing to do with Black people. It was Hunger. It's like, IRA and Ireland and all that stuff. And so he kind of came in the door, I guess, from the back door in a way, in that he didn't kind of come in like, oh, I'm a Black filmmaker making Black stories or whatever. I'm an artist making cinema, right? Mm-hmm. And then he eventually worked his way up to 12 Years a Slave and Small Axe and all those kinds of films. So that voice is getting a little bit stronger. In France, it's not necessarily quite as strong because, again, the perception of like art and cinema is a lot more generalized. So everyone is pretty much allowed to do it, I guess you could say. But there's not necessarily vocal outcry like, oh, we need more Black people doing this, or oh, we need more Black films and stuff. There have been a bunch of attempts to, especially since there's a large like North African population in France as well. So Algerians and And so those people also tend to kind of get a lot of momentum going with certain projects. But in my experience, they kind of tend to have like a big spotlight on the one project or a couple of projects and then kind of fades away. So there's no real push for like, oh, like more and more people are making stuff. As far as like front of the camera, sure, yeah, people like actors like Omar Sy, like, who are kind of breaking through and stuff and doing stuff. And like he has a Netflix series now. And but outside of that, behind the camera, they tend to stay within sort of like French cinema. Yeah, and as far as like the exports of the art is not quite as heavy, I don't think.
Okay, yeah, that corroborates what the little research that I've done with France and the French identity. They're very much about like French things as opposed to racial French things. Like, as long as you're from France, like you're good. Like we are all French. That's what I meant by the nationalistic.
It's interesting to say that. I'm in a class right now, and we had a gentleman guy come over. He was in France, and he talked about basically the racial tensions in France between those who were born there. Like, they don't see necessarily race per se, but there are a lot of issues around immigrants who've come into France and how the tensions in education and the whole system. And I was really surprised. I never even thought about it in that way, and even how they have like the parts of town where it's like, for lack of a better term, the ghetto, versus other parts of town, and how tense and even the leadership, the government system is so different, and how they just disregard them, and how we talk about, this is very personal for me. I'm from the South. They mentioned how like, the racial tensions of slavery or the enslaved, and versus what happened in France, and I'm like, it's not really the same. It's a little different. However, I get some of the commonalities in that. And so it's interesting when you think about filmmakers from those areas, they don't talk about any of those issues in their projects as much as like, I think Black people in America find a way to incorporate those, that history of American history that is so is tainted in our framework, So I think it's very interesting. But that class, when you start thinking about today's film, international, and really, how can I discover some French filmmakers who might be telling those stories? I just don't know about them, again, because there's no eyes on them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it's a big issue here in France, as far as like, just like Pat said, the idea of like who is French and the whole idea of like nationalism as well has been a big problem, because there's loads of those people from those immigrant communities and Black communities who are not seen as French by a lot of people, because they're like, oh, like your parents are from Africa, or like you're from North Africa, or wherever it is, and you weren't born here, or you speak a different language, or you're wearing a hijab, and there's a whole big discussion around that as well. As far as like it leaking into cinema, it's very much of like, oh, we're not looking that way, so we support everyone kind of thing, even though it's not really the case. But then you have certain films, like there was a film by Lajli, I think it was at the Oscars last year, or was it the year before, called Les Miserables. And that was nominated and it won a whole bunch of awards. It won at Cannes, it won at Césars and the French Oscars and stuff. And those kinds of films tend to do quite well. But again, it's similar for me anyway. I see it as very similar to the States, where for a film to kind of get recognition from those communities, it has to be about a certain kind of thing. So it's like, it's about slavery, it's about living in the hood, it's about living in impoverished communities, it's about struggle, it's about inequality. And it's never just kind of like a straight story about something. And those tend to be the kinds of films you do hear about here. So as far as like I'm aware, I'm sure there's loads of sort of like, Black filmmakers making stuff here as well in France. But you don't necessarily hear about them quite as much, because the intro into the industry is not quite as open, I would have said, as like in some other countries, as far as like getting exposure and festival love and all that kind of thing.
Thank you.
So when it comes to the kinds of films that you make, like how is for both of you, what has your experience been like? Monda, you seem to come from a socially aware kind of thing, not necessarily having to do with race, but you're talking about social issues. Is that fair to say, like in the stuff that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, it's just from a humanitarian standpoint.
from a humanitarian standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay, so like when it comes to getting that work out there, if we're going to talk about exposure, like what has your journey been as far as like getting that work out?
Yeah, I haven't been I mean, I'm a little older, and I've had a lot of years in corporate America, and so but I've always been a storyteller. I've been writing, since I was knee high to a pup, and I'd written and published 4 books, and I decided that I wanted to express myself through filmmaking. When I saw the picture of this little girl who was in the human zoo in 1958 in Brussels, Belgium. Um, and so it was something that I just felt that I was being obedient to. I didn't know anything about script writing. I thought one thing about being an author and or a poet, you just have real estate. Scripts have form and they have structure. But I knew that we're such a visual society that if I wanted to get more eyes on it, it would have to be something visual as opposed to maybe a book. And I come from the DIY school of things, right? I'm not Hollywood trained. I have, in terms of learning my craft, I have studied screenwriting with a group in New York, um, led by Jacob Kruger, called Write Your Screenplay. And for years, I've studied with them. But it was a matter of having a vision and knowing that I wanted to execute that vision. Because they say, when you make a movie, you've got like 3. You've got what's in your head, you've got what's on the page, you have what you shoot, and then you have what you edit. So I think that from an experience standpoint, it's just been important to surround myself not only with people who had way more industry experience than I did, but people who felt similarly with regard to how we're treated, how we're perceived, and I don't think that we have to make a whole bunch of serious movies to get our point across. I mean, for true equality, we should make all kinds of movies. And as Chris Rock said, when the movies suck, when black movies suck, then we're equal with white folks, right? So he said that a long time ago. But my experience is primarily just not to kind of wait on Hollywood or think that, oh, maybe I can get all this theatrical distribution. I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna find the money from somewhere and I'm gonna get it done, because there are so many different ways now that independent filmmakers can kind of level the playing field with other filmmakers, because we're in a truly digital society now. These film festivals are going virtual, and there's really no excuses. I mean, it's hustle, it's grit, it's determination, and again, it's having folks that have your back, that truly support you. So it's whether it's from the editing or what's in post, just get it done. And sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. A film doesn't have to be perfect, but you just need to execute it. Get her done. And it looks like Tony has, a huge body of work. And that just didn't come from sitting around saying, oh, well, when I have this money, or, oh, I can only imagine, Tony. I mean, I don't know you, but this is the sense that I get. You just get it done. So, my experience, so and I'm sitting on a couple of things now because I'm like, oh, it's COVID and I don't want to bother people. But at some point, if I don't create, I'm going to explode. Then slow it out,
You wonder why why I started this challenge. I'm like, I need something to do. Well, Tony, what about you? Like, as far as getting your work out there, because I know that like I said before, like your work varies in style and everything. So, like, as far as reading those stories, like, what has been your experience in the past? I know that you're now getting into self-distribution, but your experience getting your work out there, what has that been like?
I mean, Monda is 100% right. That's pretty much exactly kind of what my mantra was for a long time, because I kind of figured when I came out of film school, a lot of my peers, I guess, were either making like their first big short film to kind of like get the ball rolling, all that kind of stuff with their careers, and kind of just like, I mean, a lot of my main inspiration artistically kind of comes from filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, and sort of like independent filmmakers, even people like Robert Rodriguez, Rebel Without a Crew, all that kind of stuff. And when you kind of see the possibilities, especially with the way digital technology is advanced today, there's so much you can do for very little means up front. And I kind of saw people spending like thousands and thousands of dollars on little short films. I kind of thought, well, you can take that money and like make a feature and like do like another feature and just kind of like, so I very early on wanted to just kind of like hit the ground running and just go out and make stuff. As far as like the kinds of films that I make, I guess I don't necessarily see myself, even though of course the world would see me as such, as like a Black filmmaker. I kind of see myself as a filmmaker. And a lot of the things I grew up watching, lots of the kind of films I watch now as well, I'm not watching them thinking like, oh, like I can't make that because I'm Black, or I can't do this because it's not my story, or whatever it is. Filmmaking is about storytelling. It's about creating universes, about fiction. It's about like, it's about creating that ideal. And so for me, from the very beginning, I was like, oh, I'm really interested in like in this kind of cinema, or like this kind of story, and I'm just gonna go out and do that. I guess where my background being African, and then like African sort of like living in diaspora as well, impacted the way I approach my work, is that my casts tend to be quite diverse by default, because that's kind of just how I see it. I kind of like to work with people who don't necessarily look like me, but who I know are also from communities that are not as represented on screen, as far as like seeing films with like, I don't know, an Asian lead or a Black lead, or like a woman lead. And so my approach was always like, I kind of just want to make what I want to make. And if I'm interested in the story, I'm just going to go out and make it, even if it's not necessarily the sort of desired content for getting funding, for instance, and like for getting exposure out there. Because I know, for instance, if I was to make a film about, Nigerian immigrant in London doing so and so, whatever it is, huge exposure probably, right? Because that's kind of like what people kind of tend to lock onto. But I didn't want to do that. So I kind of just thought, I'm going to make a little sort of a Japanese serial killer film. I'm going to make a sci-fi, 70s inspired sci-fi movie. I'm going to make a sort of coming of age skater girl drama, even though that's not necessarily the world people would expect me to inhabit. I kind of feel if there's an interest there, you just kind of go for it. And sort of slowly over the years, I've kind of like, I guess, I don't want to say my work has evolved, but my tastes as far as like what I like making has evolved. And so I've kind of gravitated towards an area where I'm more comfortable kind of making a specific kind of cinema. And that's more connected to my identity personally, not necessarily my identity as a Black filmmaker, but it's something that I feel I'm more and more wanting to instill in my work, because I've gone to the point I'm just kind of tired of not sort of like responding to certain situations and certain things happening. Like obviously, like Monda mentioned about like the shooting like of all these Black people getting killed in the U.S. and same in France and Europe as well, and people just don't seem so unaware about stuff that I kind of feel like it feels so weird that people don't know about this stuff. So I kind of want to just put it in there, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's not the main focus of the story. And yeah, so that was kind of like my approach. And so I've kind of been doing a little bit more of that, even though it's not, you wouldn't necessarily watch my films and kind of go, oh, that's a Black filmmaker. I kind of want people to go to watch and think this person is an eclectic artist who's able to do lots of different things and tell story in their own way. And I feel, again, like the Chris Rock quotes, like, when Black people are able to make terrible films, when they're able to make like art films or whatever it is, and no one's kind of going like, oh, it's a Black filmmaker making it, so what are they trying to say? Then we're in a good place. And I kind of feel I've been trying to push that with my work for a while. So
yeah, for sure. And like speaking to Monda's thing about like you are drawn to, it's whatever, like you're drawn to the ideas as they come to you. Or you were saying like you speak to your ancestors, if your ancestors are the ones who are like, you got to do this, like you feel like this like this intangible need to get a story out there. Like that's really what storytelling is all about. It's not necessarily like, oh, I want to tell this because for this particular reason. It's more just like, I don't know, it just came to me and I had to get it out.
Yeah, I took a course with a gentleman. His name is John Dapolito, and he has a class on finding your niche, generally for actors, to make them to figure out what their sweet spot is, so that when they're in a film, like certain characters that you see over and over again, like Helen Mirren, or just any of these really good actors, they're kind of doing the same thing over and over again because that's their sweet spot. And so I said, well, as I think as a director, as a writer director, this will help me figure out what projects to go after if it's not anything that I'm creating myself. And so we went through an exercise, and when it was all said and done, my niche specifically was to write about fiercely independent badass women who dance to the beat of their own drum. And so somewhere, and I don't know how he got it out of me, but it did. So generally, whenever I'm approaching, there is some character in there that's just not going to take any shit from anybody, or someone who's a leader, or someone who's a visionary, and someone who's unapologetic about who they are from the inside out. So that was it was very helpful. So I know what I'm drawn to and what I can really write and present really well.
I need that exercise, like a link to the exercise or something, because I'm sure a lot of people could benefit from it, especially me. I'm just talking about myself right now.
It's your show. You can do it, girl.
Well, this has been great. I know it's been like, we're we're almost at like 40 minutes. I mean, I could keep going all day, but I know you have things to do. Was there anything that you wanted to leave? How do I word this? Like a recommendation. Okay, how about this? Say what?
I think closing remarks, thoughts, just trying to figure out, as we close out Black History Month, our Black Film Challenge, and we have two amazing filmmakers who've done things, nationally and internationally. Just some parting words and thoughts as we look to what's next.
Yeah, and also this is what I was going to say. I know that we mentioned Mubi, but if you feel that people who are watching this should check out certain, we're going back to the whole exposure thing. Like, are there any recommendations that you have for people to see not only more of your work, but more work from people of color, or just like places that they could be looking at as well as the normal.
Okay, well, I'll let Tony close out. I think that I know I jumped in, ladies first, no, but
Absolutely.
there's one of the things that I thought about is we're talking about international exposure and international influences, and race and culture and the diaspora. I read an article this week with the Golden Globes. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association is coming to fire because they have like 87 members and none of them are Black. I mean, they're people of color, but none of them are Black. So, when you look at how the, Oscar So White has been attacked over the past few years, the Hollywood Foreign Press is like, so they're going to make more of an effort. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. But with regard to films or filmmakers that have influenced me, and primarily I do lean towards a female filmmaker, because we as women may not be as tied into the white male gaze as many other filmmakers that are out there. And I don't know, Tony, since you're international, are you familiar with the concept of the white male gaze?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and so that's something that when I look at films, so when I think about Julie Dash and Daughters of the Dust, and when I think about Casey Lemons and Eve's Bayou, both of these drawn on personal experiences. And I know Julie was attracted to Daughters of the Dust just because of the beauty and the magic and the history of it all. It's those are the things that I think move me, and that we should, everyone should watch. There's been a kind of a revival with Julie Dash's film, but I mean, she was a pioneer, right? And I mean, we can go back to Oscar Michaud. We can go back to all of these kind of older, Mario Van Peebles' daddy, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Songs. We can talk about these things. Melvin Van Peebles. But when it comes to, I mean, even Zora Neale Hurston.
Yes.
Zora Neale Hurston was a filmmaker. So I just, I think, I always, just kind of embrace the Sankofa style. I mean, we got to look back and know where we came from in order to know where we're going. So I encourage everyone to kind of look back and take a look at some of these older films. And then, we come up where we've got, Judas and the Black Messiah, you know, and the Malcolm and Marie's that are out, and just what kind of trajectory that we've been on as filmmakers and filmmakers of color for the past, you know, several years. So
I have to point out that Malcolm and Marie, as much as I like it, is not a Black filmmaker. It's not a Black
Not
filmmaker.
white man. Like, oh my God.
But
it was beautifully shot.
it was
I
beautifully
mean,
shot. I'm not poo-pooing on Malcolm and Marie because I love that movie. It's just I just wanted to
visceral, and it made me feel. It made me feel. It may not have been the this is, but it made me feel something.
yeah. So could you describe
something is right? Yes, something is right.
What'd you say, Catherine?
Like that's my
So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Could you explain to people who might not know what the white male gaze is, or there's the male gaze, there's white male gaze, and there's the white gaze. But could you describe?
Yeah, and so primarily, and I guess the best way to describe it would be to you know, have people visualize. And so if you think about leaders in cinema, you know, these male directors that have, you know, these classic films, a lot of them, when we talk about the white male gaze, they objectify women, you know, and you'll see, you know, gratuitous TNA or, you know, boobs and butt when it's not even necessary. You'll see women, there's a test they used to have called the Bechtel test. You'll see women who are just, they don't have, they're just not equal to men in terms of like their lines in a film, even though they might, like a Bonnie and Clyde, you know, Clyde is going to speak way more than Bonnie will when it's all said and done. And it's just very, I guess it's very male, just in terms of the way the shots are formed. I mean, and you know, and how, just basically how films are shot. So with the, you know, with the female gaze, and I guess we're just kind of developing that because most women directors have been taught or mentored by males, right? So I think we're just in the spirit of things, we're really just trying to find, I think we're trying to find our own voices and come up with the niche that is uniquely ours, right? And I don't know if that's going to happen specifically, like, oh, this is just female, but you know, 34% of the of women directors were nominated for, was it the Golden Globes or something?
Yeah,
And that's tonight, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I gotta get off. See y'all later. No, no, but I mean, so I just think in due time, and especially with all the international influences are coming in, we're gonna see changes. We're gonna see good changes. I mean, Hollywood has a formula for putting butts in seats. So you know, if you're DC Comics, your Marvel Comics, you know, if you've got Fast and Furious 36, you're good. But anything outside of that, you know, I really think that independent voice is going to soar here in the next couple of years.
Yeah. What speaking of the male gaze, I saw like Promising Young Woman had like the best opening that was more of the female gaze or subverting the male gaze just from the female perspective, just showing like male body parts and just like dancing and stuff. Oh, that's funny. I see what you did there. So it's like cool when you start to really see that. I mean, yeah, the male gaze has been around forever. Like you can just look at any Marilyn Monroe movie and bam, there you go. You know, like that kind of stuff, or just like how women are presented or what you're focused on. And the Bechtel test has to do with just with films where you pretty much have to find a movie that has two women in a scene together alone, right? And they can't be talking about a guy, or their conversation can't have anything to do with a guy. It has to be about something else. And so that test was created because you'd be surprised how many fail the Bechtel test, because there's a lot of just like how much of their identity is gravitated towards men. Speaking of men, Tony, I'll stop talking.
I mean, I guess, I mean, how do I see the sort of trajectory going? I mean, I really like the idea. I mean, well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that I like that there's so much focus now on Black filmmakers and Black artists and actors and films and filmmakers are kind of like experimenting and doing lots of different things. But on the other hand, of course, it's trendy right now. So of course, people are going to try and look for projects like that. They're going to support projects like that. And as much as I hate the commercialization of it, I think it's great because it actually gives opportunity to lots of filmmakers to actually get out there and be seen and be heard and to get their films made. And not just, and people who are in the independent space can get their films made and know that they'll want to be seen by certain people in the seats of power who have basically power to basically get the films out there and exposed to a general public. And I hope that also just inspires other filmmakers and other Black artists to actually just go out and do stuff. I mean, there's loads of people who are watching shows like Atlanta or Insecure or I May Destroy You or Top Boy, whatever it is, all those kinds of projects, Lovecraft Country, you know, all the different films coming out of Europe as well and things like that. And thinking like, wow, you know, I can make that kind of film. Like, you know, oh, like Jordan Peele's into, he's a horror guy. I didn't know there were Black horror guys, you know, that sort of thing. And I really love the fact that even if it's a trend, people are actually been given the space to explore and to fail and to try stuff, and people are seeing it. And I'm looking forward to, I mean, obviously now, like Monda mentioned, Judas and the Black Messiah, and there's loads of films like that now that are kind of coming out, and they might be about the Black experience, but I think what people will hopefully take more away from it is the fact that they're really well-made films or really well-made projects or really well acted and stuff, and that Black people are capable of that. And they'll give them opportunities to do more outside of the scope of just like, oh, you're a Black filmmaker, so here's a Black film to make. I hope that, you know, Gina Prince Bythewood went from Love and Basketball to The Old Guard, and I'm really, really happy for that jump. Regardless of whatever you think about the films, I'm happy that she was able to make that film. And, you know, and if you don't know who she is, you don't even know that it was directed by a Black woman. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I kind of want to get to that space where you can watch a film and go, oh, that's really great, and not go like, no, oh yeah, Black filmmaker made that film, let me check it out. It's just like, you know, oh, this is a great film. Like, oh, Black filmmaker, oh, great, okay, whatever. But you know, I like the movie. So yeah. I'm really hopeful for that to be the case in the future. And as far as like finding new projects and new films, I think Criterion Collection are doing a really amazing job right now as far as like promoting Black cinema and Black artists and Black filmmakers, the history of it, and also new filmmakers. But also Mubi, which is an international platform. And they have a really excellent curation, I find. And it's lots of international filmmakers, a lot of Black filmmakers, lots of African filmmakers as well, American filmmakers. And the discovery there, if you have the time, if you have the stomach for it, because it can be quite cerebral. And so you might kind of find yourself in a week where like all the films on available are kind of a bit heavy to get into. But if you find that one gem, I think you'll really benefit from it. So I think it's definitely worth giving it a shot.
And on that note, I would also recommend a shout out Kweli TV, which is like is a platform that's been around for a few years, which is specifically like when they launched, they called it the Black Netflix, or that was the thing where it's a platform that has films by people of African descent, by them, maybe with them, but definitely by Black folk.
And a key thing too about Kweli TV is that they actually give commission to the filmmakers, so you get to make money off of your film being on that platform. So it's a sharing profit process, and I think people don't understand how powerful that is.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't make money with Netflix. You make no money with Netflix.
So yeah, so following those, great. This has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything you wanted to add, Carlota, before we get into the prize?
No, just thank you. It's been a very robust conversation to end out the month. Two amazing filmmakers, and just really excited to have these conversations around not just United States-based projects, but international projects. I think it's something we don't do enough of. Again, in my class, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I never thought about anybody outside of the U.S. who was Black. So that needs to change, you know. So, and even looking at films in the same way that I love films and I like making films. So why not look beyond the borders of where I currently live? So thank you guys for your perspective. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some of the projects you mentioned. And is it Mubi? You said MOBI is the platform?
MUBI.
MUBI. I want to check it out. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I was looking in that today because I'm planning. There is a plan to get everyone's curated stuff online from the challenge. There is something in the works there, so stay tuned. But yeah, I was looking into Mubi, like how could that work? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So I wanted to go over the prizes since we're going to do it a little bit differently this go around, since this is our last week, our last foray. So we're just going to pick some people at random who have not been awarded something. So sorry, the past 4 people, you're no longer qualified. But Monda, if you could pick a number between 1 and 28, we'll give out
17.
17. All right. I don't know, like Carletta, should I give it to past guests as well? Because there's some past guests on this list.
Why not? I mean, you know, they can always defer if they don't want to, and then they can pick somebody to receive it.
Okay, because the first one that's on number 17 is Landis Stokes, who was our guest from the first one. Our cinematographer, filmmaker.
And it was plus the first one, like with guinea pigs or a beta test. So maybe that's like a consolation prize for being our first one also.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still figuring out our
oh, so I need another number? I need to pick another number?
No. We'll give it to him. We'll have 2 things. And then so Tony, who's next?
8.
8. Jason Dickinson.
Yay.
Yay, Jason. All right, so the 2 lucky people, 2 lucky guys are getting, they're getting swag from ICAM Productions and from Black Girl Film School. And they're getting a day pass to a film festival. There's one happening, like, what is it, next week?
It's next week. It's called Haiti Film Festival out of North Carolina. They get a day pass for March the 3rd. It's an amazing panel with my cousin Byron Hurt and led by Natalie Bullock out of Working Films. But there's a day pass for that whole entire day. As far as
it's all virtual, so you can watch.
Virtual?
Yep.
Nice.
You can watch from the comfort of your own home. Anything with that. And if you are not available for that day, then we do have. Then we will be offering another day pass to a film festival in the summer. And I don't know if I should mention what it is, but it's like, yeah, it's just a film festival.
It might change, yeah.
It might change, but there will be, if you're not available for that for March 3rd, you said?
4th, March 4th.
For March 4th?
4th be with you, yes.
Okay, March the 4th be with you, God. If you're not available on March 4th, then you will get a day pass for another film festival later this year. So congratulations to the both of you. Woo! Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I could not think of a better way to close out the Black Film Challenge year 1. We'll see if there's a year 2, probably. But yeah, thank you. Thank you guys so much. Oh yeah.
My pleasure. And lovely to meet you, Monda and Carletta.
Yeah, let's connect. I'm on WhatsApp. I got WhatsApp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you or your work?
Yes.
And or your work? Monda. Go.
Oh, okay. I mean, you can Google me, honestly, but I'm on all the platforms. I'm not on TikTok really, but I'm on YouTube. I'm on Pinterest. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. And, I don't know what else it is out there, but I'm on it, trust and believe. And then on Twitter, of course. But my film, you can, Zoo Broker Show is actually on YouTube right now. So if you I mean, most people are like, what is Volkerschau? I can't even spell it, but it's German for human zoo. But just look up Zoo Volker. I mean, VOLKERSCHAU, and you can find it, or Monda Raquel Webb. And but yeah, just for the most part, it's I'm either under Little Known Stories Production Company, Little Known SPC, or Monda Media. But generally, if you put my name, all that stuff will come up.
Okay, fantastic. And Tony?
I guess I'm primarily on Instagram these days at Photo Voyager. Otherwise, I've got a Twitter, which is at TS Ukpo, UKPO. And then my website, I guess, so vertigoheights-film.co.uk.
Great.
And also, if you Google me, a lot of that stuff will probably turn up. Tony Sebastian Ukpo, and then you get stuff.
Great. What's your IG again?
Photo Voyager.
But what kind of photo? PH or FO?
Oh, no, PHOTO
Okay.
Voyager. Yeah.
Okay.
Real question. That happens.
And
Word.
I know that you just started a consulting business if people are interested in like.
Oh yes, I did. Yes. So I'm doing consulting for like filmmakers, working on scripts, going into independent production as well. So basically advising on scripts, script editing, also doing diversity consultation as well for folks. So basically how to better diverse your cast and crew, how to better diverse your storytelling as well. And yeah, just kind of general consultation for creatives as well.
Nice. I love it. Love it. Fantastic, guys. Well, this has been a pleasure. And thank you. Goodness, why? Thank you so much for joining us and watching and participating and hopefully watching these movies. One of them is Teresa Jusino, who I'm going to shout out once more. She's been like the most impressive participant so far with her, because she's been watching the films that she's picked, most of the films that she's picked, and then she's been doing Insta stories talking about just her impression of it. And I'm not going to completely quote her, but she has been like, man, if I hadn't done this challenge, I would have not known about this film, and it's been great. So I'm hoping that continues with people, participating in a challenge. You can always go to the website, blackfilmchallenge.com, to see what the categories were. You can take a look at all the past recap videos that we've done. And there will be a catalog eventually of like films that have been found, so you can find them yourself, you can contribute as well. That's kind of what I want to build towards. So you can contribute and post like, hey, I saw this film that could be useful. And then the database will be like a living, breathing thing. So that's kind of the idea, but we'll see if that, let's see how my technology skills.
You're taking the first step, though. You're taking the first step, and that's impressive. So.
Okay, this research, I'm totally impressed by all of it. So just be happy to be a part of it. But yeah, looking forward to more to come. So stay tuned. There is more.
Yes, we will be back at some point in time for more fun. All right.
Thank you all. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Wear your mask. Wash your hands.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. Yeah. Stay safe out there.
Don't judge people. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.